Hi everyone. Now I wanted to tell you about the third essential element of a valid contract, which is contractual capacity. So, contractual capacity's element requires that the parties to the contracts must have contractual capacity to enter into the contract. So, a person to have full contractual capacity to enter into the contract about by what they have entered into. However, there are certain persons may not have full contractual capacity, and they are minors, innocent persons, or intoxicated persons. So we talk about individual mostly. Okay, so we will look at the contractual capacity of it of the three categories that I already mentioned. They are minors, innocent persons, intoxicated persons. Why the concepts of contractual capacity arise? Common law and many state statutes protect persons from lack contractual capacity from having contracts forced on them. Why? Because if you do not have full legal capacity to enter into contract, you are in a disadvantaged position. And if the law allowed the other party who have full capacity to enter into the contract and force the contract against you, it could be grossly unfair to you. So that's why the concept of contractual capacity arises. And if you want to claim that the contracts cannot be enforced on you because you lack of contractual capacity, you or your guardian or your authorized representatives bear the burden of proofs, which means that you have to prove that you do not have full contractual capacity. So, who are minors? Minors are defined differently under common law and statutory law. According to common law, minors are defined as females under the age of 18 and males under the age of 21. It sounds strange, isn't it? And you may think that common law discriminates against people based on their genders. However, it seems to be that even in reality, you can see that maybe female a little bit mature earlier than male. It may not be 100% true, but actually common law based on what happens in the real life that you already know. However, under statutory law, the person who reached the age of maturity when they 18 years old, regardless of whether they are males or females. And you already know the principle. If there is any inconsistency between common law and statutory law will prevail. And in the United States, many states have already enacted statutes that specify the age of maturity, which is 18 years old, for both males and females. So in those states, we don't have to argue about whether that particular person is minor or not, because statutory law already stated very clear. Okay, it's applied 18 years old at the age of maturity. And if you are under 18 years old, you are minors. So if you are minor and you enter into a contract, so what are the issues that you need to pay attention to? So in this part, we will look at the infancy doctrines And we will look at the ratifications of the contract. We will look at parent liability for their children contracts, and we will look at certain contracts which are entered into by minors, but can be enforced on them. Or in other words, even though minors enter into contract, but for certain types of contract, minors are bound by their rights and obligations under those contracts. Or in other words, contract enter into minors in some specific situation or circumstance or cases will be valid and binding on minor. So now we look at infancy doctrine. Infancy doctrine is a doctrine that allows the minor to disaffirm, or in other words, cancel the contract that they have entered into with the adults. Okay, and in such a situation, the contract is voidable by minors. I hope that you still remember what a voidable contract means. Voidable contract means a valid contract unless the eligible party choose to void it. So in this case, if the contract entered into by minor and the other party is the adult, the minors have the choice whether to enforce the contract or to disaffirm the contract. So most of the case, the contract entered into by minor are voidable contracts, which means that the minor, not the adult, have the right, not an obligation, remember, to cancel, to disaffirm the contract. So that's what is said by the infancy doctrine. So what is the underlying principle of the infancy doctrine? The underlying reason for infancy doctrines is that there is a public policy of protecting minors from unscrupulous adults, which means that some adults actually try to utilize their knowledge, their maturity to take advantages over the minor. So that's why the law created infancy doctrine in order to protect minor. So how the minor who want to affirm the contract do so? The disaffirmance or cancellations of a contract by minor can be done orally, in writing, or by conduct of the minor. What does it mean? You know about how the contract is entered into already, right? The contract can be entered into verbally, in written form, or by conduct of the parties. So when the minor wants to disaffirm the contract, he can do so by either means, orally, in writing, or by conduct. They are all accepted. For example, if yesterday a minor accepts your offer to buy something from you, and tomorrow he changes his mind, he can telephone you and tell you that I do not want to continue with the contract anymore. Okay? Or if yesterday the minor and you enter into written documents on buying and selling something, the next day the minor may change his mind and the minor may send you an email saying that, I'm sorry, I have to walk away from what we have agreed yesterday. And they can do so. Or even by conduct. For instance, if the minor yesterday agreed that today we will come to your store to work for you, for example, assuming that there is an employment contract already be in place, but today the minor changed his mind and he's never come. And in that situation, he exercised his rights to disaffirm the contract. And the law also requires that if the minor want to cancel the contract, want to disaffirm the contract, he must do so within a reasonable time of reaching the age of majority, which means that he have to do so within a reasonable time of reaching the age of majority. So what could be considered reasonable time? Again, the law will use reasonable person test to determine whether such a period of time is reasonable or not. And of course, the minor can always disaffirm the contract before the age of majority and also within reasonable time after he turned 18 years old. He reached the age of majority. So what could be a reasonable time? So 1 month, 2 months, or even 3 months after a person turned 18 years old may be a reasonable time. During that time, he may change his mind because he already mature enough to think against and look at the contract, and he feel that the contract isn't fair to him, for instance. But if he waits until a year to pass, it could not be treated at a reasonable time anymore. However, but if something wrong happened to him within that period, what about during that first year after he reached the age of 18? He is sick and he can't do anything within that period of time. He needs to be treated and he was in the hospital, and in that situation, after 1 year could be a reasonable time. Okay, so you understand how to apply a reasonable person task in order to assess whether the minor exercise his rights of disaffirmance of the contract within a reasonable time. So, if the minor decides to disaffirm the contract, what are the consequences? The consequences which the minor will enjoy is that the minor have the obligation to return the goods or property received from the adult, but only in the conditions as it is at the time of disaffirmance. So, for example, if the minor contract to buy a brand new car from the adult, and he used the car for several months, and he decides to disaffirm the contract, he is under obligation to return the car as it is at the time of disaffirmance, which means that at the time of disaffirmance, the car now becomes a used car. It's not a brand new car anymore. But the law allowed the minor only to return the car as it is at the time of disaffirmance, which means the second-hand car. And he doesn't have to pay compensation, to pay any differences in the value of the car. You know that the brand new car and the used car are very much different in the value. So you can see that the law tries to protect the minor. However, the adult doesn't have the right to ask for the payment of the differences. In other words, the adult only have the rights of restitution. So in case the minor already paid for the car and then he disaffirms the contract, the adult have to put or place the minor back to the position that he at the time he entered into the contract, which means in status quo. So we take the case of buying and selling the car as an example. At the time the miner buy the car is a brand new one. And at a brand new car, the car value is 1 billion, for instance. And the miner already paid 1 billion for the car. 3 months later, he decided to disaffirm the contract and he returned the car. The car now becomes old car or second-hand car. The value of the second-hand car could be significantly reduced from the original value, which is 1 billion. Now the value of the car just only 800 million. So in that case, the miner have the right to give the car to the other SSE at the time of this affirmance, which means the second-hand car. But the adult have to return the full amount of money that the miner paid to him at the time he entered into the contract, which is 1 billion. Okay, understand? So, however, there are exceptions to the above rule, which means that the miner will have the duty of restitution, which means that the miner have to put or to place the adult in a status quo, even disaffirmance of a contract if it belongs to one of the following situations. The first one, if the miner intentional or grossly negligent conduct caused the loss of value to the adult property. In that case, the miner have to put the adult in the status quo, even his disaffirmance of the contract. So what does it mean? I can give you an example. If the miner buy a brand new car from the adult, and then during the first 2 months of using the car, the adult was drunk and he caused an accident that caused damage to the car. And now he wants to disaffirm the contract because he has that right under the law. And he then wants to cancel the contract and give back the car to the adult. According to the principle that I mentioned in the previous slide, he can return the car as is at the time of disaffirmance and receive back the full amount that he paid for the car 2 months ago. Is it fair to the miner, to the adult? No, it's grossly unfair. So the law developed the principle that if the miner intentionally or grossly negligent conduct caused the loss of value to the other property, and then the miner had to place the order in status quo when he disaffirmed the contract. So what is an intentional conduct? Intentional conduct means the conduct that you intend to do. So in the case that I have just given you as an example, of course, the miner did not intend to cause damage to the car, that is the accident. But the accident resulted from the grossly negligent conduct of the miner. So what grossly negligent conduct means? Grossly negligent conduct means an extreme indifference to or reckless disregard for the safety of others. So gross negligence is more than a simple carelessness or failure to act. It's a willful behavior done with extreme disregard for the health and safety of others. And of course, it is conduct likely to cause foreseeable harm. So in the case that I gave you as an example, the minor were drunk at the time he used the car. And everyone could know that if you are drunk, you could cause accident. So in that case, it means that they a grossly negligent conduct committed by the minor. So that is the first exception that the minor have the duty of restitution. The second situation in which the minor have the duty of restitution is if the minor misrepresented his or her age at the time he enters into contract. For example, if a minor who under 18 years old, when he entered into contract with adult, he told the adult that he already 18 years old. But in fact, he was not. So later on, he wanted to utilize his right to disaffirm the contracts that he entered into with the adult when he was under 18 years old. Can he do so? Yes, according to the law, he still can do that. He still can disaffirm the contract. But in that case, because he misrepresented his age, or in other words, he lied about his age at the time he entered into the contract, he lost the right to be treated at a normal case or normal situation under infancy doctrine. He still had the right to disaffirm, but now he have a duty of restitution, which means that if he wants to cancel the contract, he still can do that, but he have to pay the differences in the values of the property if it had been changed from the time he entered into the contract and at the time he disaffirmed the contract. For instance, if he bought a brand new car and the car value is 1 billion, but the car had been damaged because, first of all, in the first case, he was wrong at the time he driving the car and he caused accident and the accident caused damage to the car. He want to disaffirm, yes, he can disaffirm, but when he returned the car, he have to pay the differences in the price between the car which is brand new and the car which already been damaged because of the car accident. Because when he actually caused the accident that create damage to the car, he was grossly negligent. Okay, so he have to pay the differences in the value. Or at the time he entered into the contract, he misrepresented about his age. He said that I already 21 years old, and he entered into the contract to buy the car, the brand new one. Several months later, he changed his mind. He wants to disaffirm the contract. He wants to return the car, and the car now become new car. And in that situation, he have to pay the differences in the price of the car between the brand new one and the second-hand one. So that is the duty of restitution. So I just want to repeat, even though the minor still have the rights of disaffirmance of the contract, but the consequences of disaffirmance in this situation it differ from the normal case. So they are the exceptions to the infancy doctrine. As mentioned previously, contract entered into by minor are voidable at the option of the minor, but there are exceptions to that general rules. The very general or very typical exceptions to that general rules is that the contract entered into by minor for necessary are binding on minor. So which means that the contract for necessary entered into by minor cannot be voided by the minor under infancy doctrine. So contract for necessity is an exception of the infancy doctrine that doesn't allow the minor to disaffirm the contract. So it is very important to determine what are necessities of life. Generally, food, shelter mean the place to live in. Clothing, medical services are necessity of life. However, you could know that even though they are clothing, they are place to live in, apartments, okay, medical services is something different. But for example, shelter or clothing. So what clothes are for necessary and what clothes are for luxury are the things that the court need to determine. If you are a normal minor, you are a student, okay, you go to school, if you enter into the contract to buy a very luxury clothes, for example, LV clothes, for instance, it could not be treated as contract for necessary. Okay, but if you are minor, but you also an actor, actress, or a movie star, or very famous singers, you need some very special clothing for your performance, for instance, and it could be treated as for necessity. So it depends on the circumstances. Okay. However, even though the law says the minors who enter into the contract for necessity are bound by such contract, which means that the minor have to perform the contractual obligation. However, what about the price of the item for necessary that the minor buy? The law also creates a rules that the minor must pay only reasonable value of the goods or services only. So if the adult utilize these legal rules to sell food, to sell clothes to minor at an extremely expensive price, which are not the price that they could offer to another adult. And then the law will say, okay, even though this contract is for necessary and binding on the minor obligations is only to pay for the normal price or reasonable price, okay, not the price that the adult offered to him or asked him to pay. So that is different between the contract with the enter into by minor and enter into by an adult for necessary item. Okay, so that rule is actually come from the policy, the public policy to protect minor. In addition to contract for necessary, which cannot be affirmed by minors, there are some other types of contract which provided for or which required by state statutes not to be affirmed by a minor. So example of the contracts which are required by state statutes not to be disaffirmed by minors includes the following. For example, contract for medical care. You enter into the contract for treatment of a particular disease or illness, and that is entered into by minor, binding on the minor. Contract for life or health insurance, or if the minor enter into educational loan agreements, with agreements that allow the minor to borrow a certain sum of money from a certain bank for education, or the contract to support children. If a minor have a child and he or she have an agreement to support a child, he or she cannot affirm that contract. Or the contract to enlist in military. So what is the contract to enlist in military? You know that when a person wants to join the military, they need to enter into the contract what you call enlistment contract. And the enlistment contract is very serious. If you already enter into that contract, regardless of whether you are minor or not, that contract is binding on you. And the next type of contract which cannot be disaffirmed by a minor beyond statutory law is entertainment contract, sport or entertainment contracts. And in the entertainment contracts, it's usually a contract between an artist and an entertainment company. And in that contract, it usually determines how the entertainment company will manage the acted performance, the acted work, and how the art of the minors and an artist is produced and distributed, and what is the profit, the benefit that the minor being an artist have, what is the ratio of distribution between the artist and the entertainment company. So if the artist is a minor and the artist already have a contract with an entertainment company, the minor is bound by such a contract to perform the contractual obligation.